Roseanna, you have been on a quest for the last couple of years to build the next generation learning organization. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? What is the next generation learning organization?
Well, from my perspective, Jennifer, the first generation learning organization, the research that built up and brought to our attention that effective leaders need to be teachers and learners. All the rich work of Noel Tishy and his progeny, I think, introduced us to the notion that for a leader to be effective, they had to be both a teacher and a learner at the same time. And that whole notion meant that organizations had to be willing to let go of the side of the pool and swim in the deep end of trusting each other, much like we do in a classroom. That's much easier said than done. That was an aha when we saw that research, because we found that leaders who had a vision and could communicate it in a teachable way would get back in a feedback loop from those who were following them ideas to take their vision to the next level. And it would be iterative. It would spiral and grow, as opposed to a traditional turn of the century command and control from the top down, an arrow that goes straight down and doesn't allow for any growth. That was powerful from a leadership development perspective. What we have found in what has happened over the last decade is the landscape of business has been constantly changing. I like to say we're being asked to do open heart surgery in an earthquake with chopsticks while it's raining. Everything's changing. And the life of our business and our people's growth and innovation is on the table. And so much has happened on the economic landscape that has influenced this, to be sure, over the last 10 to 15 years. But technology and what has happened on the technical landscape has rapidly forced us to look at the world of technology differently. Technology as competitive differentiator has taken on a whole new game. That's why I believe IT organizations have a unique opportunity to really become game changers. It's no longer enough to deliver excellent systems on time and on budget. You have to be more than that. You have to be able to change the game and be a competitive advantage. We see this happening with cloud. We see it happening with big data. So for me, the next generation learning organization has to deal with this changing landscape. That, coupled with our employee base. The millennials have introduced us to a whole new kind of talent. And the millennials' successors have taken that to the next game. So from my perspective, the importance of the learning organization cannot be overstated, but it requires a different kind of mindset from our leaders, from our strategy, and from our execution.
So, speaking of IT organizations and this new frontier, this new role, tell us a little bit about the background of your work with DirecTV and the attempt to turn their IT organization into a group that's a value contributor. Give us some background on that.
Well, DirecTV has an amazing leadership team in IT. I was engaged by the SVP of ITSD named Sven Gerjetz in 2013. And it essentially was an executive coaching engagement. Sven, many years ago, had worked for me when I was an SVP in AT&T Wireless. And he came to me and he wanted to take his game, his leadership game, to the next level. And what he was sharing with me was essentially this landscape of how at DirecTV, which is obviously a robust, game-changing technology company in what it's doing in TV and entertainment and sports. So IT delivers their products and supports them. IT is the heartbeat in that model. They deliver hundreds of systems at significant dollars, of course. To be able to do it at the pace that's necessary to be competitive, they had to be a very agile, strong team. But they also had to accept the fact that they were going to have to pivot because no technology can be perfect all the time for the start or for the evolution. So what he found was in the development as well as in the launch and the maintenance, the people in IT who aspired to excellence were always struggling with the fact that there were failures. And failure became a stigma, and people wanted to either bury it, not own it, and everyone didn't want it to happen. So this team of high performers who were dedicated to excellence was struggling with failure because they had to do more of it, they had to pivot quicker, and of course you had the changes happening that they were leading their industry in. So what we discussed, and we spent quite a bit of time thinking about, was how failure is really an engine. It's an engine that drives growth and innovation if you use it to learn from. And that was the birth of F12. Sven wanted to create, in his solutions delivery organization, a culture that embraced failure. Now, it's important to recognize how we're defining that F word of failure.
Focused failure, I think. Is that right?
Exactly.
What is that?
That's a good failure, a focused failure. That's a failure where you have done all the preparation, you converted your intent to expectations, and then you executed those expectations. You prepared, you executed, and you still had to deal with failure. Because shift happens, as they say. In the old
Well
country.
said.
And a focused failure is one where we immediately see it, we're candid about it, we all own it, and we take what it took from us, we learn it, we convert that learning to an application, and we teach everyone else. The ecosystem here of learning requires identifying that failure, learning from it, applying that learning so that you can grow and innovate and perform, and then teaching it to everyone else. Now, obviously, you can't teach the failure to everyone else unless you're open, candid, and very public about it. That's a focused failure. A failure that is not acceptable in this cultural transformation is a failure that happens because of sloppiness, recklessness, unpreparedness. That's never acceptable. So what we birthed was a culture built on what we called Failure 12, F12, which was a 12-step program built around failure. The goal of F12 is to drive high performance in innovation across the entire organization. The 12 steps really talk about, much like you would expect in any 12-step program, the ability to admit that fear of failure drives blame and erodes performance. So the first step says that we cannot succeed with failure, with fear of failure in our hearts. And we recognize that blame is much easier and safer than confronting failure. But unless we confront failure, we can't innovate and grow. So essentially what we did in these 12 steps was declare a leadership manifesto that required us to accept, as Brene Brown says, that we are hardwired for struggle. And demanded of us, as she also says, to have the courage to be imperfect. And then, and only then, can we learn and grow. So Sven and I, and an amazing millennial by the name of Russell Bacon, embarked on this wonderful cultural transformation journey. We built the 12 steps. We created a definition of failure. Sven actually went on video and said what was in his dictionary for failure. So we replaced Mr. Webster with the IT high performers across that organization. From the very top, Mike Benson, the CIO, to the very bottom, the line employees. When Mike Benson, the CIO, saw what Sven was doing, and Sven intended to do it within his team of solutions delivery, he liked it a lot. And he said he'd like to do it across IT. And I think it took great courage and great vision to be able to embrace F12 that way across his 900-person organization before we had even piloted it in solutions delivery. And that's pretty much how F12 was born.
One of my favorite things about the F12 program was the F files. Tell us a little bit about the F files and the role that those played.
Well, we recognized that one of the things that drives passion and engagement in an organization is having some fun. And so we built F12 around a secret agent model. We created Mike Benson, the CIO, was the director of the agency. Then he had his generals, and then in each sector of IT, he had 6 direct reports. In each of them, from solutions delivery to business intelligence to strategy and innovation and operations, we created lieutenants that would own executing F12 in each of the sectors. So we had a bit of fun with that. And then we had everyone define failure. But what we learned was that we were learning from the organization. That's the beauty of this. When you embrace a learning organization, you're constantly iterating, constantly learning. The trick is to be able to do it in a way that focuses the learning on applying it to drive high performance and innovation. So we got the definition, and we found that that wasn't enough for us to have a common leadership language, a common set of rules. We needed to openly study our failures. So we began to make video case files of the X files. These were cases of our failures that we did videos on, said, here is what happened. Here's how it happened. Here's what we learned, and here's how it won't happen again. Sven did that in his organization, and that became a model for everyone else. We challenged everyone else to make videos. And mind you, these are not high-tech DreamWorks videos.
No Pixar.
That's right. We're not challenging Pixar on this. These are low-tech. But what we found, and what I find fascinating from an educator perspective, is that people really learned more by watching a short video about what happened, being told, the story of it being told by the people who lived through it, than they did in reading a report. We all know in the corporate arena the area of postmortems, right? And we get together in a room and we document it and we share it. There's absolutely value in that. But what the X-Files did by putting on video and making it a mini case study was it made it accessible, it imprinted the learning in a different way, and it engaged the learner. We found that this was exactly the same model that we use in business schools. As you know, I teach for NYU SCPS. I'm an adjunct professor there in their Leadership and Human Capital Management program. And I teach exclusively business school case studies, which is participant-centered. What I found was that these case studies that the IT organization was putting together to essentially teach each other the failures that they lived through and how to apply the learnings from those failures were exactly the same thing. Those employees and those leaders were basically creating a participant-centered model. They were so engaging and candidly so innovative that we decided to have an Academy Awards at the end of the year for the X-Files. And we even gave out Oscars. Here, I'll share with you my Oscar.
Wow, that looks very official.
And what we found was that unleashed employees to make videos that taught amazing things. The profundity of this was incredible. The organization taught us that was a better way to communicate and teach, more effective than our blog posts, more effective than our collaborative online spaces. They were immediate, they were focused, and they told a story. There's no big aha there in that we've had all the leaders who've done research in leadership telling us leaders have to tell effective stories. But what we had here was the organization taking a failure story and making it a success. And that was very, very profound. And that is when our Chief Inspiration Officer, Rush Bacon, really unleashed the power of F12. What Russ proposed was that we use a game, F12, the game, to teach about failure. And we created what I believe was a year-long architecture for this game. We used some of the asynchronous learning from a wonderful tool out of Harvard Business School Publishing called Harvard Manage Mentor. And we taught some of their modules, innovation, business process. And I thought that would take us through at least 6 months, and we created some videos and put them in games. Now, I have to confess that when this was first proposed by I2, our Chief Inspiration Officer, I did say, really? I mean, this is really about corporate performance games? And what I learned from this amazing millennial was that gaming is serious business. The use of gamification was an answer to drive transformational learning that I never expected. Because gamification is the ability to use game thinking and game processes to engage audiences, drive different behaviors, and create transformational learning. The power of that, the DirecTV IT organization has demonstrated over and over again. We very quickly ran out of content. When we launched F12, the game, we had what we thought was a year's worth of content in there. We promised quarterly prizes. The head on the leaderboard, the winner on the leaderboard each quarter would get an iPad from the CIO and recognized. So the interesting thing that happens in gaming, and the reason it's able to drive such engagement and performance results, is that it's very public. If you think about the way we handle performance in corporate America, in IT, outside of IT, we do performance reviews. Managers get together, set goals early in the year. God willing, mid-year, they sit down and give feedback to the performer on how they're doing. And then year-end, they give them final feedback. And along the way, hopefully, they put together a development plan to allow that employee to reach beyond their potential. It's very hard for managers to give bad news. We're not good. No one, human beings in business or in their personal life, are good at confronting another and saying, hey, you didn't do that well. Hey, that's not acceptable. Unless you're a parent teaching a child, we're not comfortable with that. We're very good at giving rewards and praise, but we have a hard time having those conversations. Never mind making ourselves vulnerable to each other and saying, I failed, now let's talk about it. So what F12 was doing and what the game was allowing us to do was to give feedback, a context that was meaningful. The game, because when you log into it, you see exactly where you stand in all of IT. You see where you rank from number 1 to 900. You see how much you have achieved in terms of badges. And it's a level playing field. Everyone, from the EVP to the brand new employee, has the same opportunity to earn the same points in the same games. So it's a very level playing field, as performance management should be. It's constantly candid, and it's in real time. You don't wait till the middle of the year to see where you're doing. You see it every minute you're in the game. I really think that those principles in the game enabled us to do a term that I believe captures this entire concept. A term that I coined for exactly this is performification. We're using games to drive high performance and innovation. And the reason the game works is because of the structure I've just described. People trust it, people see everyone's equal in it, and they get very engaged. We were shocked at the amount of engagement. We ran out of content in 3 months.
What is the content of the games? How do they work? How do you feed content into it? How do you come up with the content?
Well, a game is a container for a number of missions. So F12, the game, in our first year, contained many missions, and all the missions were about failure. And when we saw that we were running out of content, and when we were looking at the kind of engagement we were getting, we also launched a sentiment analysis tool. There's a number of them now that you can see on the market. And that enabled us to see that the game was really engaged and liked by people. So we decided we're learning from the organization. Let's have the organization create missions to be put in our game. And that unleashed employees creating their own missions, giving it to the game. We had a group of game guardians led by none other than I2, our inspiration officer, to make sure that those missions fulfilled the level playing field. In many ways, the gaming environment has to be quite pure. You can't launch a mission in a game that has a wrong answer, because that means the hundreds of people that get that wrong answer and get the points, then someone figures out it's wrong, then you have to take the points away. The game is contaminated if that happens. So it's critical that the missions that you're putting in the game are correct. The Guardians would review that, and then ultimately another group, the game oversight group, would operationalize it in the game. People became very engaged in that, and they wanted more. So we said, okay, you want to earn more points in the game? Then teach what you're learning in the game. If you have a lunch and learn, and people come and you teach them, we will give you a bonus code for a certain number of points. We even went so far as to reward people creating innovative tools. One of our teams created a failure vault, V-A-U-L-T, a vault, where the employees across IT could document the failure, document what they learned, and put it in the vault, so that before products or systems were launched, those employees that were looking to launch a system would go into the vault for a pre-mortem. Isn't that a beautiful thing? They're embracing failure before we even launched for the failure. How beautiful was that? And we gave points for that. The use of games to drive performance, performification, I believe, can fundamentally change the attitude people have in an organization about failure, about innovation, about performance, and I think can unleash a new breed of leaders who are able to have richer performance conversations. That these tools and what we're doing here doesn't exist solely in the space of F12. It really is changing the leadership mindset. And one of the ways it does it so effectively is the leader isn't someone with a title or with people reporting to them. A leader in our F12 culture is everyone at every level, because the line employee has been empowered and encouraged to share their failures as well as point out others, as long as it's done in a way to drive learning. So these behaviors that you see being driven by F12 as a culture and by the game ultimately change the way people lead. So when a manager sits down to do their performance review with an employee, F12 should have a silent seat at the table, because it should be a much richer discussion.
Talk a little bit about how you logistically worked that out to create missions and games that applied across the board.
Well, we started with these amazing F-files, and then we found that we needed more. The organization was hungry for more. It was rabid. So we said, here's how you can create a mission. I too did what he does so brilliantly. He created a creator mission so people could learn how to basically put the technology together. And essentially, our missions start with a video or a document. But mostly we start with video because we find that the most engaging. And then there'll be a quiz after that. And you have to get a certain number of answers right on the quiz to go to the next task. The task applies the learning in the first video or document, and then there's another quiz. And you do a number of those until you get to the end. The goal of the mission is to teach, apply that learning, and put you in a position to teach someone else. We started with case studies, and then we broadened it. We invited people to give us their best thinking. And sometimes they would download a TED Talk, and that would be the video, and then they would apply it in IT, in their environment, and then move forward. So it was really up to you were only limited by the creativity of the person who was creating the mission. And believe me when I tell you, the IT employees of DirecTV were incredibly creative in many, many different ways in that. This gave us a unique opportunity for leaders to talk to the whole organization. And what we did this year was we had each of the direct reports to the CIO, the IT leadership team, and the CIO himself, and then one layer down, the direct reports of the IT leadership team, create a mission in the game where they had to tell their organization their teachable point of view, to quote Noel Tishy, on what they needed from their team to deliver high performance and innovation. Essentially, if you will, a mission performance goal. So this was alive and in real time, an employee watching their leader and saying, here's what I need more of from us. For us to achieve high performance, I want to see more collaboration. We have to be collaborative because it's the only way we can be competitive. So the leader said, here's what my expectation is. Now, then the leader, after he or she did that teachable point of view, then had to apply it to their organization. So the employee would listen to the teachable point of view, take a quiz on it. Then the leader would teach them something else that applied it and take a quiz on it. Essentially, we had 3 levels of performance management on video in missions in a game. That's really changing the game of traditional performance management. And then we opened it up to the organization and created a game environment where we could do more than that with it. We found that as powerful as what we had was doing in the workplace, we wanted more. We wanted leaders to be able to create a game with its own missions, perhaps for just an isolated need. For instance, if I'm working in operations and I'm going to have an offsite with my team, and I want to really focus on innovation in a certain area, I might want to create a game for that offsite that I want all of my employees to take before we go to the offsite. And then at the offsite, the conversations we have will take off at a higher platform because that game would have worked. I might charge all of my direct reports to put a mission in that game. Now that game would have a beginning and an end for that offsite. One of the innovative things that was done in DirecTV for a meeting like that was the operations SVP, Tennis Fleming, asked the men on his team to do a mission about women leadership. What does women leadership mean? And then he asked the women to do that on men leadership. And they both created missions. And the conversation then that happens at that leadership team level becomes richer, engaging, and more powerful. These custom games, I believe, gave leaders an opportunity to do very, very different things in performification for the game.
So this process led to something you call living the learning.
Yes.
Tell us what living the learning means.
Well, if you think about what we've been discussing, the ability to learn, apply the learning, and teach it, what you're doing is living the learning. F12, unless it changes the way we work and unless it changes our delivery results, is nothing more than a very fancy, interesting idea. So we recognized in our first year that it was supremely engaging, that it took off in ways we never expected. Our organizational health scores were off the charts. Productivity was up 30%. We saw the power of engaging a workforce that had an appetite to make itself vulnerable, to embrace focused failure, to recognize that we cannot succeed with fear of failure in our hearts, and to enjoy the learning through a game. We knew then that we had to be able to do more with it. And as I spoke earlier, the way we originally structured it was each of the different sections of IT had lieutenants assigned to be in charge of F12 in that segment. Those lieutenants got together and put a definition of what living the learning is. And I'd like to read it to you because these 70 some odd folks spent 2 days with me at a learning boot camp. And they pretty much worked nonstop. And the goal was to be able to create, for 2014, a definition of living the learning. We defined failure in 2013, and we learned the importance of learn, apply, teach. In 2014, we were ready to look at that for what it is, and we agreed it was living the learning. And everything we do in F12 is about that. And listen to the definition that this group of 70 put together. We drive learning and teaching built on a foundation of trusted relationships and accountability to realize our shared passion. Isn't that interesting? They're talking about a very profound leadership mindset. Then they go on to say, we strive for long-term success by experimentation and having our voices heard and acted upon at all levels. That's an incredible mandate for inclusion that is tied directly to performance. So they're not waxing poetic here. They gave us a leadership value for their first statement. They talked about driving performance through inclusion, through unleashing the unheard voices to drive results. And then lastly, and this is my most favorite part, I really think it speaks beautifully to the power of those lieutenants. We emerge a fearless, unified learning organization that delivers unparalleled innovation and value to our business and customers. That's incredible.
Your innovation of living the learning in F12 led to sort of a quote unquote EMBA program for some of the living the learning leaders. What did that look like and what was the purpose of that?
Oh, we're in the middle of that now. The living the learning definition became the rallying cry of 2014. The definition of failure was the rallying cry for 2013. So when living the learning came around, we had to figure out how would we make this real. So in the game, all of those teachable point of views by the top levels of leadership that were in the game, we decided we had to reward people who actually went out and acted. It's one thing to engage on it, it's another thing to act. And as our lieutenants taught us, it's about delivering results. So each of the IT leadership team leaders and the CIO were given bucks with their names on it. Looks a little bit like Monopoly money. And any employee who took their teachable point of view and got their points, if they went out and applied what they learned and did something, they could go to that leader. For each of these games, we had a space in the game where the employees could write and say, hey, Mike Benson, you talked about collaboration. Here's what I did this week. Here's what it resulted in. And then Mike Benson could actually give bucks. And those bucks translated into points in the game. So we were taking performification from the game and driving it directly and tangibly in the workplace. Most importantly, we were starting a conversation, a live human-to-human conversation with the leader and the employees. Throughout this entire process, F12 had a presence on Core, DirecTV's social media site. So there was lots of conversation happening about F12 all the time. This actually created conversation that was direct, where we could say, this is the performance I want. The employee could say, here's the performance I did. And we could say, here's some bucks. And there you were on the leaderboard. We decided that we wanted something even more than that. And that's when we recognized that the power of the employee and the leader being in a virtual teaching circle, as Noel Tishy would say, the virtuous teaching cycle. Noel's theory is that the leader throws out the teachable point of view with its strategy or vision, and then the employee takes it, adds to it, and iterates it back. We've been doing that with the game. We've been doing that on core. Employees were taking up the cause and doing it. We wanted to do it in a more formal way. So we decided that we would invite employees to apply for our EMBA. Now, let me be really clear. This is not an executive MBA. It was not affiliated with a university last year. It was an EMBA in name only because we wanted to be able to say, this isn't a training course. We're not training. This is about living the learning together with a senior leadership team member. We asked the entire employee base to apply for this. You had to post either a 500-word essay or a 2-minute video on our application site saying why you were the best living the learning leader to take this program. The things we got, Jennifer, were remarkable. And what the postings themselves were remarkable, both the videos and the writings. And then what happened? Employees started reading them and writing to each other and saying, that was really inspirational. I didn't know you did that. And most people made themselves very vulnerable, saying, because they had the background in F12. So they were saying, I grew up in a world where I couldn't get anything less than an A. Anything less than an A was unacceptable. And that's created an inability for me to be able to talk about failure. F12 gave me permission. So it was a wonderful learning for the whole organization. And then, of course, the powerful leadership team that we have in IT, and I can't say enough about them, they commented on the applications and encouraged employees. So you had leaders learning things about employees in this 900-person organization they never would have learned. You have employees learning from leaders and talking to each other. And then none other than the CEO of DirecTV, Mike White, he commented, along with his head of technology and head of HR. You had a real engaged conversation that reaffirmed to the employee base how committed the leaders were. We had a very, very, very hard time selecting 70 employees. We have 7 professors, the CIO and his direct reports. We have 10 people in each class when we launched, and it is built around a very clever book called The Adventures of an IT Leader. It's a fictional book written by 3 professors about an IT organization where a business person is made the CIO. And this is his adventure of figuring out how the heck he's going to lead an IT organization when he has no IT background. So each month, our professors who learned how to teach the case study method went into their virtual classroom. By the way, we're teaching online via Link, which is one of the tools DirecTV uses. And the professor goes in, they teach the chapter. In that class, those employees have to do a number of different things. One, part of the class is a project related to the case. So they're given 15 minutes to go off in pairs and come back and proffer a solution to the project. So they are living the learning in coming back with a real solution. And in that class, we do an exercise that I've created called Shock and Awe. Shock and Awe is an exercise that requires you to be able to answer a question in no more than 3, count them, 3 sentences, no uhs, no ums, and be shocking and awesome. The reason shock and awe is so important is, as you develop in your career, to be executive ready, to be boardroom ready, you need to be able to think on your feet critically, to have critical thinking skills that are not only deep and adept, but they have to be able to pivot and think and think adeptly when in fact you weren't prepared for the question. So the way I like to teach this is, imagine your CEO sees you in the hallway and asks you a question. Roseanna, how do you feel about our administrative heritage change? Now, I didn't expect him to ask me that, but I want to give him an answer that says, ooh, that's somebody, when I have a special project, I want them. Ooh, when I'm sitting at a talent review, I want him to remember me. So to be shocking and awesome is very important. And in fact, when you present in the boardroom or when you present in any meeting, if you can be shocking and awesome in the presentation, your content will imprint on the listener and you will have greater success in execution. So every class starts with each one of those very committed professors asking a shocking and awesome question about the case. And they call on their 10 students at random, and each student has to answer in 3 sentences. And if they or they get shot down immediately. The beauty of the class, though, on Link is that it is recorded. So you can go back and watch your failure. You can go back and hear the feedback that you received and that your peers received and learn from it. Our classrooms, like our workplace in IT at DirecTV, are crucibles that are meant to be safe for failure. We actually want the learning to push our learners towards failure so that they can embrace it and grow even further. The more failure, the more focused failure that you can experience, the more you will learn, the better you can perform, and the greater you can innovate. And that's what each one of these IT leadership team leaders do in their classroom. Those students then, after the class, there's 10 students, they all come from different parts of IT. They must figure out what learnings were the most important, how they can apply them in their jobs. So 10 people figure that out and then come back and share with each other. And then collectively, they must select the one learning that would have the greatest impact across IT. And then they must make a mission out of it. And they have 6 weeks to create a mission to teach the rest of IT what they just learned. The EMBA began last year. We concluded in December with that model. And this year, we've just started the next generation of the EMBA. It's the same incoming class. But this year, the game has changed because we keep learning, because the organization and the performance keeps teaching us. And NYU is actually offering a certification in IT business leadership that each of these students will graduate with. I am an adjunct at NYU, so I have prepared the curriculum. Our professors are teaching in the same model, but there's a few different twists. This year, we have said to our EMBAs, you must become, our expectation for you is that you will be an extreme F12 athlete. And that means you must embed F12 in the work, you must embed it in performance management, and most importantly, you need to build leaders at all levels. So each team of the 7 classes has had to put together a plan to build leaders at all levels. And we've said to them, we'll even give you points to award if you want them. So they're in the process of creating their strategies now. They will take 3 classes this year with their professors, and we will be doing an IT-wide. The entire 900 people will be online together to take a class with Professor Scott Snook from Harvard Business School, who will be teaching the case studies he wrote on Coach K and Bobby Knight on leadership. Our focus this year is to enable everyone in IT to walk the talk of F12, live the learning, and drive high performance and innovation in the transition that they are working towards if the AT&T deal goes forward. So in that world, when Scott Snook teaches all of IT, one day, 2 hours, he will teach, and then our EMBAs, all 70 of them, their job will be to do sessions with the 900 people that apply what Scott teaches to drive high performance and innovation. So as you can see, we're going to take our EMBAs, who were the students and are the students this year, but we are going to get them in the teacher seat very directly to do what the IT leadership team has done. The model is an ecosystem that is constantly pushing everyone in it, the leaders leading it, which is pretty much everybody, since F12 requires everyone to lead from any chair. But from the hierarchical, from the titled leaders who are actually running organization, to the EMBAs, to everyone in IT, the ecosystem is always pushing itself further. And that's what makes this so powerful. It is a next generation learning organization that uses technology to raise the bar, that uses vulnerability to feed the growth, and it uses failure as an engine. And by all means, Jennifer, stay fearless and focused.